Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here this morning. Perfect timing for the sun to come out. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cam Clark, and I have the privilege of being the director of the Indiana Department of Natural Resources. And I want to welcome you to Falls of the Ohio State Park, as well as Falls of the Ohio National Wildlife Conservation Area. It is truly our honor to play host to today's event and an exciting announcement. And I would be remiss if I didn't welcome you to mile marker 605 of the Ohio River, which is essentially the central point to the new 1,200-mile legacy extension to the Lewis and Clark National Trail. And there's a lot of people that deserve thanks for making today possible. I want to certainly thank Senator Young and Congressman Hollingsworth and Pence, the members of the Lewis and Clark Expedition Committee, Lieutenant Governor Crouch, certainly our partners with the National Park Service and local and state and federal partners, all who played a part in making today possible. So thank you all for making this happen. You know, it's our pleasure to be the caretakers of the George Rogers Clark site, just a little down river from here, and that's the site where Meriwether Lewis and William Clark met, shook hands, and began planning the expedition west to the Pacific Ocean. And at that site, we host events. We also here tell the story of that day. We also tell the stories of the local expedition members that they chose to be part of that adventure, and certainly stories from the expedition itself through multimedia here at the Interpretive Center, which I encourage all of you, if you've not had a chance to experience it, please do so before you leave us today. We are excited that the attention this will bring to the Falls of Ohio State Park. We're probably more excited about working together to continue to tell the story of the Lewis and Clark Corps expedition, the Corps discovery, both locally and nationwide. So again, thank you all for being here. Welcome again, and let's get this celebration started. I'm going to introduce Mr. Paul Fetter, the president of the Clarksville Town Council.
Good morning, I'm Paul Fetter. I'd like to thank you on behalf of the town of Clarksville and the Clarksville Town Council, our governing body, who are seated on the front row. I'd like to welcome everyone to the historic town of Clarksville and thank all those involved for the efforts in extending the National Trail. We are here today to celebrate the national announcement of the extension of the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. This has been a decades-long marathon. Some of us involved today, myself included, are new to the efforts and honored to help carry the torch across the finish line. We'd like to thank the National Park Service for selecting Clarksville, Indiana for the location of the announcement, and the Indiana Department of Natural Resources for hosting this event. I'd also like to thank God for everyone getting here safely and bringing us this beautiful weather. We've had rain for days, and He parted the clouds for us for a few moments, thank God. Clarksville is rich in its history. It's the first town in the Northwest Territory. It was established in 1783 by General George Rogers Clark, 5 years after he founded Louisville, Kentucky, and 2 decades before the state of Indiana was formed. In 1803, President Thomas Jefferson commissioned the Lewis and Clark Expedition, a peaceful, military, scientific, and exploratory expedition to find the most direct and practical water communication across the continent for the purpose of commerce all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Clarksville's optimal geographic location at the Falls of the Ohio River and being home to William Clark, Revolutionary War hero George Rogers Clark's brother, it was selected as the ideal operational staging point of the Lewis and Clark expedition. Co-expedition leaders Meriwether Lewis and William Clark met in Clarksville and made their famous handshake at the Falls of the Ohio. Over the next 2 weeks, they enlisted the Corps of Discovery, during which time General George Rogers Clark provided the expedition with strategic intelligence from his vast experience of his decades on the frontier, and with his expertise in Indian relations helped them move forward across the country. The Lewis and Clark expedition began, opening the door for the great westward American expansion. In Clarksville, we like to say, the Lewis and Clark expedition, it began here. Clarksville's critical point and the most important expedition in world history has largely been overlooked in countless documentaries. And for the last 2 decades, several dozen senators and representatives, both federally and nationally, and governors from 5 states, and members of Lewis and Clark organizations and commissions, many of those who are here with us today, have worked tirelessly to correct this historical omission. On March 12, 2019, President Donald Trump signed into law Senator Todd Young's bill, the Eastern Legacy Extension Act, extending the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail all the way to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Senator Todd Young has been representing Clark County, Indiana for nearly a decade, first as a member of the House of Representatives and now as a U.S. Senator. In that time, he's been a tireless promoter of our state and our region, in addition to leading the charge to extend the National Lewis and Clark Historic Trail to Indiana. He's also been a leading proponent of making the Indiana Dunes our state's first national park. Please help me welcome Senator Todd Young.
Well, thank you, Paul, for the generous introduction. Thank you all for the warm welcome. Thank you for being here. This is a magnificent day. It's great for the city. It's great for the entire area. It's great for the state of Indiana and for the country. Representatives Hollingsworth, Pence, Lieutenant Governor Crouch, other distinguished guests who I know have worked for years on this. I want to welcome you all and thank you for your past efforts. It's hard to believe. It's been more than 200 years in the making, but today we are making it happen because of this team effort that extends over, frankly, generations. In 1803, as has been said, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark joined up with the Corps of Discovery on a mission to explore the West. They met here in the town founded by William's brother, George Rogers Clark, or as one of my young interns put it, isn't it weird that Lewis and Clark met up in a town called Clarksville? Lewis and Clark, their team, often called the 9 Young Men from Kentucky, showed extreme bravery, intelligence, and perseverance on their journey to the Pacific. Since the 1960s, they've been remembered through the Lewis and Clark Trail, which has provided educational and tourism opportunities along the same route the Discovery Corps traveled. Now, the trail had run, as so many of you know, from St. Louis, Missouri to Astoria, Oregon. But until this year, the trail was incomplete. It ignored the years and the places leading up to St. Louis, when Lewis and Clark were training, recruiting, and preparing for their journey. I've worked on extending this trail for a number of years, and I just can't reiterate enough that I'm standing on the shoulders of others who've also worked on this. I see in the front row State Representative Matt Pierce, my friend, who served on the staff of Congressman Barron Hill, who preceded me as Congressman in Indiana 9th District. I commend the Congressman and the Representative and others for their previous work. So finally, we're able to recognize Indiana's unique role in this expedition. And I'm proud to say, with the support of my friends in both the House and the Senate, we were able to get it done. Now, the Lewis and Clark Trail spans the entire southern border of Indiana. But no one spot is more significant than right here at the Falls of the Ohio. I think the sun came out when I said that, too. Today, Indiana is known as the crossroads of America. But before there were roads, there was Lewis and Clark, joining forces where we stand today to begin an exploration that would really change the world. William Clark once wrote, quote, "I have always held it little short of criminality to anticipate evils. I will allow it to be a good, comfortable road until I'm compelled to believe otherwise." So here's to a good, comfortable road going forward. I'm excited to see what the future holds. It's a privilege to be with all of you. God bless.
We had a late addition. Senator Mitch McConnell wasn't able to be here with us today, but Andy Candia has some prepared comments he sent for him to read. Andy, if you could, please.
Thank you all very much for the opportunity to be here. I know Senator McConnell doesn't represent this state in the Senate, but I'm pretty sure it's behind me. But he was very proud to bring to the floor for vote and support the passage of a comprehensive and bipartisan lands bill that would help protect our nation's national treasures for future generations to enjoy. From the beginning, the senator worked closely with the Senate Committee on Natural Resources to develop a public lands bill that would benefit communities across Kentucky and the country, and he was happy to see provisions included to extend the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail, as well as provisions to incorporate both Camp Nelson and Mill Spring Battlefield, both in Kentucky, into the national park systems. Senator McConnell has long been a champion of conserving public lands for Kentuckians and everyone in the United States to enjoy, as well as to help drive tourism, and I so appreciate the opportunity to take a few seconds today to help mark the expansion of the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail. Thank you very much.
What an authentic Kentucky accent. Next, we have U.S. Congressman Trey Hollingsworth. He's serving his second term as U.S. Representative of Indiana's 9th Congressional District, a wide-ranging district comprised of small businesses, suburban communities, and hardworking farmers and striving students, all united by their focus on how we collectively build a more prosperous, safer, and stronger America. Trey serves on the House Financial Services Committee, and he's also working to create opportunity to remove government blockades to enable each generation of Americans to live better than the one before. Please help me welcome Congressman Trey Hollingsworth.
Well, 70 years ago, Enrico Fermi was asked late night while he and others were working on the Manhattan Project why it would be that America would prevail in World War II. Enrico Fermi was born in Italy and had immigrated to America just before the outbreak of the war, and he was absolutely certain that America would win the war. And when asked about it that night, he said, "No people anywhere on this earth are willing to explore the limits of their capability and follow into the depths of their curiosity than the American people." And that is very much what we are celebrating here today. The curiosity of the American people, the willingness of the American people to explore what was then unknown to them. And I hope as we celebrate this day and we mark the extension and the connection of this trail, that we will connect with that spirit of exploration, that spirit of curiosity. That we will remember that it's not just exploring geography, but also exploring who we are as a people, exploring what we can do as a people, exploring what we believe as a people, that we will be reminded of that. I couldn't be more excited to be here with you today to celebrate this extension and to celebrate the hard work, as Senator Young said, of so many people that came before, of so many people that invested the effort to have this place, to have the continuation of this trail recognized as an important milestone in American history, an important milestone in who we have since become. And so thank you for investing your time here today in celebrating that exploration and that spirit of curiosity that still breathes life into Americans. Thank you so much.
Next, U.S. Congressman Greg Pence, we think we know who his brother is, represents Indiana's 6th District, where he lives with his wife Denise in Columbus. He's a proud father, grandfather, and Marine officer and small businessman who will ensure Indiana's 6th District continues its strong tradition of leadership in Congress. Joining the Marine Corps in 1979, his hometown of Columbus, Pence considered his role in Congress as a new opportunity to serve the community, the state, and the country that he loves. Pence understands that the 6th District needs a leader who will prioritize constituents and ensure Hoosiers have a seat at the table. Pence serves on the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee and the House Committee on Foreign Affairs at the 116th Congress. Please help me welcome Congressman Greg Pence.
Well, thank you, 9th District, for having me down here today. It's an honor to be here on behalf of the 6th District. Tom Saunders kind of told me when I was running for office, you got to get involved in this when you get to Congress. I want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for having me here today. Senator Todd Young, and Congressman Hollingsworth. Great to be with you all. Thank you as well to the members of the Lewis and Clark Expedition Commission. It's an honor to have voted for and participated in this event. I'm proud to co-sponsor the Eastern Extension Legacy Act, and I see it's one of the highlights of my first week in Congress to do something productive in Congress instead of all the infighting that you see on whatever you want. As we celebrate the 1,200-mile expansion of Lewis Clark National Historic Trail, I am confident that generations of Americans will experience the beauty and wonder and of the core discovery. I spent many years working down in this area and ran along the path here many times. Thank you for all you've done. Thank you for having me here today.
Additionally, late comments from U.S. Congressman John Yarmuth. Nicole Yates is here to read those for you quickly, please.
Good morning. I serve as Congressman Yarmouth's district director, but it's also especially exciting for me to be here today because I serve on the board here at the Falls of the Ohio as your vice chair with Chairman Bill Reedy, who is over there. Wave your hand, Bill. All right. And I also serve with Representative Matt Pierce because I am a former employee of Congressman Barron Hill. Very excited. Worked for him for 10 years. So it is exciting for me to be here today to represent Kentucky's 3rd District Congressman John Yarmuth, who is unable to be with us. And so I will read his statement on behalf of the people of Louisville, Kentucky's 3rd District. I want to offer my sincere thanks and congratulations to everyone involved in this effort. I'm sorry I can't be here with you to help celebrate this historic news, but I wanted to pass along my appreciation to all who dedicated their time, passion to making this extension a reality. It certainly didn't come easy, but our collective persistence will now allow this important 1,200-mile stretch a federally recognized trail to continue to East Pittsburgh. I'm particularly proud to have worked with Senator Todd Young, Congressman Andy Barr, Congressman Trey Hollingsworth, and former Congressman Luke Messer and others to ensure the Department of Interior completed their review of this much-needed project and that the Eastern Legacy Extension Act would find its way into the public lands package signed into law just a few short weeks ago. Today is a great day for Kentucky, for Indiana, and for our nation as a whole as we celebrate Lewis and Clark and their important role in making America what it is today. Thank you all.
And now for Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch. She's a lifelong resident of Evansville, where she lives with her husband, Larry Downs. She was elected Lieutenant Governor in 2016. She was previously served as Indiana State Auditor. Before assuming that role, she was a state representative, also a Vandenberg County Auditor and Commissioner. As Lieutenant Governor, Suzanne oversees a portfolio that includes tourism development and other state departments and offices. She serves as President of the Indiana Senate and chairs the Indiana Counterterrorism and Security Council. Lieutenant Governor Crouch received her bachelor's degree, majoring in political science from Purdue University. But one important event that happened as this came together was this keelboat got here. And without her and her office, this would not have made it. In Indiana, the permits for moving large equipment, you get 5 days to get your permit in and to get it answered. Well, it turned out the truck driver called 4 o'clock on Friday afternoon and said, I don't have my permit to move the keelboat into Indiana. We were shocked. We weren't sure what to do. I knew Phyllis had a contact with the Lieutenant Governor's office. She promptly called them, and they worked late into the evening, Friday night, into the next day, into Saturday, and they did it the right way. They got through the different departments to make sure that they got their permits correctly. It would have been simple to have the state police go and escort the board in, but they did it the way you're supposed to do it. Please help me welcome Lieutenant Governor Suzanne Crouch.
How wonderful it is to be here with you this morning. Governor Holcomb and I are so proud to support, and I'm so proud to be a part of this historic announcement. And it is so good to see our partners in the Indiana General Assembly with us today, Senator Garden and Grooms, and Representatives Fleming, Pierce, Saunders, Clear, and Engelman. Thank you for your service. And of course, Senator Young, Representative Hollingsworth, and Representative Pence. Thank you for your service to the state of Indiana and to our country. Thomas Jefferson said, "I like the dreams of the future better than the history of the past." And it was those dreams of the future that brought, in 1803, Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to Clarksville, where they set off and traveled the Ohio River, embarking on their journey towards the west. Today, it is the history of the past that brings us together for this historic announcement. The 1,200-mile extension of the Lewis and Clark Trail will benefit not only Indiana's economy, but our tourism, and allow us to leave a mark on the national map. Indiana joins 11 other states in honoring our predecessors who began their great adventure. And in fact, because of this, Indiana is the last state to have a national trail. It is my pleasure to support Senator Young and Representatives Hollingsworth and Pence, those who work so hard in ensuring that Indiana and 9 other states are recognized as contributors to the Lewis and Clark legacy. What is so great about Indiana are her people. You here today, Hoosiers all across our great state, hardworking men and women who know that when we come together and we work together, we can build a better tomorrow. And that is what we are doing. So thank you for the honor of serving as your Lieutenant Governor, and God bless you.
Thank you again, Lieutenant Governor. Jim Keith was appointed by the governor in 2003 and reappointed by succeeding governors as chairman of the Indiana Lewis and Clark Bicentennial Commission, known as the Lewis and Clark Expedition Commission. He observed early on that many people involved with the Lewis and Clark history and story were descendants or academia, and he knew that this was a tremendous tourism opportunity. As director of the Clark and Floyd Counties Convention and Tourism Bureau, at the time known as the Sunny Side of Louisville, he led the effort to embrace the story from local Clarksville's perspective. Retired after 30 years as executive director of the Tourism Bureau, he continued his valiant role in the Lewis and Clark story as chairman of the Lewis and Clark Expedition Commission. Please help me welcome Chairman Jim Keith.
Thank you, Paul. The Indiana Lewis and Clark Expedition Commission, a state commission going back before the bicentennial years of 03 and 06, which is a non-funded, non-staffed, Lieutenant Governor, you noticed that, right? Commission of all volunteers with 7 members appointed by the governor of Indiana. Jim Keith, the chairman, Lucas Green, Department of Natural Resources, Mark Newman, Department of Tourism. He's since moved on, but he hasn't been, a replacement hasn't been appointed. Dr. Carl Kramer, Historic Society, Jerry Robertson, citizen from Sellersburg, Phyllis Yeager, citizen from Floyd's Knobs, and Jerry Wilson, citizen from Versailles, Indiana. We also have legislative members, the 4 of them, Senator Ron Grooms, Jeffersonville, Senator Mark Scoops, Bloomington, Representative Matt Pierce, Bloomington, and Matt served as the first chairman of the commission. I was appointed in 03. And Representative Tom Saunders, and I think where he lives is very appropriate, Louisville, Indiana. So we appreciate that. In addition, we have, we created additional members we call foundation members. Carlene Budorf, who's a board member of the local tourism bureau and has been for 25 more years, and also a former state representative. Danny Cummings, who was bicentennial chair of the signature event that was held in Clarksville. And Jim Holmberg was the signature event in Louisville, cooperated together for the biggest second signature event at the time in 2003. And then also State Representative Ed Clare serves on the foundation also as former commission member. Claudia Crump, Indiana University Southeast, with the Cultural Resource Centers. Brian Kaluzny, Clarksville Parks Department, big help. And Jim Epperson, the current Executive Director of the Tourism Bureau. Since the beginning, the Indiana Commission has led the effort for the Eastern Legacy Trail Extension. It's been a constant. This goes back to starting as Senator Young alluded to Barron Hill. When Barron was a brand new congressman, there was planning for the bicentennial years of '03. He shows up at the meeting and basically was asked, "Why are you here?" And he responds, "Well, that's for my district. Lewis and Clark started in Clarksville. That's my district, so I thought I'd attend this meeting." Matt Pierce at that time was his administrative aide in Washington, D.C. So we've had a long history of Lewis and Clark. That's kind of started the process with our involvement in Lewis and Clark and establishing that Clarksville needs this true place as a beginning of the Lewis and Clark story. It was followed by Congressman Mike Sodrell in 2006, and then again another unique event. You had a congressional hearing in Clarksville to say, "Gee, we need to study this, have the National Park study this. We need to get it started." There's a congressional hearing where congressmen came to Clarksville for the hearing to get that process started. Of course, it took 4 years for the Parks Department to start the study, but they started in 2010. They thoroughly studied it because it took another 6 years to get the study done, the extension study. At that point, they kind of thought, well, that's a pretty good deal. We think we need to do that. So 2018, Representative, again, the tremendous Indiana connection, Lieutenant Governor, you mentioned the connection. You had the House of Representatives, Luke Messer take the charge, Susan Brooks from Indiana, Bill Johnson from Ohio, and John Yarmouth from Kentucky. They introduced the bill, got it passed in the House. A month later, it goes to the Senate, where Senators Joe Donnelly and Senators Todd Young shepherded in the Senate. Got to the last week of the year, after Christmas, December, they lost but one vote. Oh well, Senator Young came to the occasion and they all came together and it was signed into law March 12th, 2019. So through the leadership of Lewis and Clark Commission, we got the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation involved. They're headquartered in Great Falls, Montana, and they've been having a board of 14 members. Traditionally, that had been primarily a Western organization, west of the Mississippi. But we worked real hard, and Phyllis Yeager of our commission got involved with the Bicentennial Council in 2001 until its sunset in 2006, and then became a board member for 6 years from 2004 to 2010. She was followed by Jerry Robertson of our commission, and he was followed by Jerry Wilson, who currently serves on the board. Other board members are Chuck Crace of Prospect, Kentucky, with the Ohio River chapter of the organization, along with Mike Loesch of Mason, Ohio. So there's a long tradition involved in that. Jim Holmberg of the Filson Society is also very involved at the Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation. So we've had strong support of what we call the Eastern Legacy, or Eastern support for the advocates and supporters and staff support for the trail extension. That's been very, very positive. Also strong support of a Kentucky member, a former president of the Trail Heritage Foundation, is Jim Mallory of Lexington, who makes yearly visits to Washington, D.C. to encourage elected officials to extend the trail. And he visited Mark Wheatley so much in Omaha, Nebraska, at the National Parks headquarters. I believe people out there thought he was a resident of Omaha. A big thank you to the many individuals and groups who've contributed to the effort the past 18 to 20 years for the Eastern legacy of the Lewis and Clark Trail to become an official part of the Lewis and Clark Historical Trail. Why do we do this? National recognition of Clarksville's role in leading the Lewis and Clark story. Lewis came down the river in the keelboat from Pittsburgh, arrived in October 1803 in Louisville, recruited, trained 9 young men of Kentucky, the leadership of the Corps of Discovery, departed with about 33 people, and the destination was St. Louis. We know they had a very successful trip. They spent 9 days training and enlisting. It was a military operation. They departed October 26, 1803, and then returned on November 5th, 1807. I've said this many times, and I truly believe that there's no community in the United States who has embraced the Lewis and Clark story as well as Clarksville, Indiana has. That goes back with hosting the second national signature event during the bicentennial years in October 2003, development of the Lewis and Clark Bicentennial Park, building the replica of George Rogers Clark cabin at the cabin site, part of Falls of the Ohio, developing the Lewis and Clark Greenway Trail, which had a kind of a grand opening this past Saturday. It's exciting to see all the activity there. Then the Interpretive Center, the film, the video, the little theater on Lewis and Clark's story, which is very good. And of course, the bronze handshake statue over here. So this is just the beginning of the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail from Pittsburgh to Clarksville to St. Louis. We had an opportunity to officially tell the story from the Clarksville perspective to visitors, tourists, historians, school children, residents, and take a lot of pride in the community. So thanks to all those who look forward to a bright future as we continue, as we proceed on with this story of Lewis and Clark. Thank you.
And now, the living legend, Peyton Bud Clark. Born in St. Louis, Missouri, he is a great-great-great-grandson of William Clark. He and his wife Mary currently reside in Crooked Lake, that's west of Brighton, Michigan. Bud's an avid collector of antique firearms and Western Americana, specializing in Lewis and Clark period artifacts. Bud has had his items exhibited at the National Park Service, the Filson Historical Society, the Lewis and Clark Interpretive Centers in Great Falls, Montana, and Washburn, South Dakota, the Museum of Idaho, the Gerald Ford and Lyndon Baines Johnson Presidential Museums and Libraries, the National Rifle Association National Show, and numerous Lewis and Clark events. In addition, Bud has been a great speaker at many events across the country. Bud is a longtime member and executive board member of the Lewis and Clark Heritage Trail Foundation. In 2005, he received the Foundation's Distinguished Service Award. Bud is also a leading member of the Discovery Expedition of St. Charles, portraying Captain William Clark, which completed the Eastern Legacy in 2003. And then in May 2004, they continued chronologically up the Missouri to recreate the Lewis and Clark expedition, taking the story in living history to communities across the country. For Bud, the privilege of interacting with the Indian tribes along the trail was one of the most significant aspects of the adventure. In 2001, Bud was invited to the White House as a family representative for a special ceremony in the East Wing, where President Bill Clinton presented William Clark's Captain's Commission to Bud, officially making William Clark Captain retroactive to 1804. Please help me welcome the great living legend, Bud Clark.
I'm kind of taken back by all of that. Thank you very much. For the Clark family, this is like old home week, coming back to the falls is always a special treat. My wife Mary's with me today, my daughter Lisa, my grandson Chase. And we never feel like strangers here. We always feel like family. And we've been here many times and always been treated warmly on both sides of the river. The Louisville side, where my good friend Jim Holmberg works at the Filson, who I've worked for many, many years. Some years ago, I guess at this point it had been decades ago, my brother and I made a pilgrimage down here to visit Jim and do a little genealogy work at the Filson. Okay. And when we were finished there for the day, we crossed over to the sunny side with the intent of visiting the site of George Rogers Clark's home overlooking the falls. Okay. We came over here and started searching around, and we found a sign in a boulevard not too far from here. And Jim, I'm sure you remember that sign. And it said something to the effect, somewhere around here George Rogers Clark lived, overlooking the falls. Well, that was a bit of a disappointment, but nonetheless, we walked the areas and walked through the bushes out and overlooked the falls, etc., you know. Well, some years later, it's a horse of another color. It's very appropriate that we should be officially honoring the official naming of the Eastern Legacy here at the falls. Certainly this area on both sides of the river, especially in Clarksville, exemplifies what the Eastern Legacy is all about. And we see what has transpired in this area from a grassroots effort, from the community coming together and working together and making things happen. And now when you come to visit George Rogers Clark's home site, you will find a beautiful park area. I've had the pleasure of sleeping down there a few times. It's a wonderful place to visit, to picnic, to bring the family. They have wonderful events down there. And of course, the grounds that we're standing on also exemplifies what happens from a grassroots community effort. People like Phyllis Yeager, excuse me, Jim Keith, Danny Cummings, and many, many others that have worked so long and hard to make things happen over here. And on the other side of the river, you have Locust Grove, the home of William Clark and George Rogers Clark's sister, who married William Cron. You have the wonderful things that have been done on the waterfront, the heroic statue of York, the Filson and their recent expansion. So there's so much going on here at the falls that it's the essence of what the Eastern Legacy is all about. When we pushed off in that keelboat from Elizabeth, Pennsylvania in 2003, we really didn't know what to expect. We knew that we were going to chronologically stop all along the river and visit every little town, every big town, from Pittsburgh all the way to the confluence of the Ohio. But we really didn't know what to expect. We were overwhelmed the way the communities came together and made special events happen for their local area and their local community. And in the long haul, it's not just marking the Lewis and Clark Trail that the Eastern Legacy is all about, but rather it serves as a catalyst for the communities to recognize their own local history, special things that have happened in their own communities, and in so doing, coming together and becoming a closer knit community. And on a larger scale, the bicentennial and the Eastern Legacy will be a catalyst for things like that to happen. And as we come closer together, we become a closer knit community family. And that's a good thing. That's the legacy of the bicentennial. That will be the legacy of the Eastern Legacy. People coming together to mark their history and the special things that happen in their own backyards. The Eastern Legacy has taken off long before today in the minds of historians and people that are close to the Ohio Valley, close to the history of the area. Starting in Pittsburgh, PA, one of our members, John McNulty, has been very involved locally there. They now have signage at the head of the trail, if you will. Soon there will be more historical markers up on the hill overlooking Bruno's Island. So good things are already happening, and they will continue to happen as we come down the Ohio from community to community. So I'm very, very proud to be a part of that. I'm proud to be friends with so many of the wonderful people here today. I thank our honored guests for all their support to make this happen. And I like to think of it as just the beginning of things to come. I'm sure it will be. So thank you all for the privilege of speaking here today. I'm very honored to be here. I'm very, very excited about seeing our American family come closer together, and I know it will, all down the Ohio Valley. So God bless our American family, and thank you all.
And the moment you all been waiting for. Mark Weekly, I'd like to introduce the superintendent of the National Lewis and Clark Historic Trail for the past 10 years, with the National Park Service for 27 years. This is the man that tells how it happened.
Wow, that's all I can say after listening to everybody here. This is so exciting. And there's a common theme I'm seeing here that really struck me. When Lewis and Clark went on the expedition, it was about collaboration, it was about partnership, it was about different people working together for a common goal. And the creation of the Lewis and Clark Trail, and particularly the extension of the Lewis and Clark Trail, is about people coming together, working together to make this happen. And it is so fitting that that's the way this has been created. I would like to thank everybody that was a part of this, but if I were to list everybody, number one, we'd be here all day, and I think I would probably forget somebody, and so I'm not going to take that risk. But one thing I do want to acknowledge, and I think it's worth noting, is somebody who's not here is Dr. Stephen Ambrose, the author who wrote Undaunted Courage, as well as many other books. He did something very few, if any, authors had done before him. He actually talked about what happened before St. Louis and Wood River, Illinois. He talked about the expedition, the preparation for the expedition, the preparing for it, what it took to get to this point. And I think that was incredibly important and plays a really important role in us being here today. People became aware, many people who hadn't been, how much led up to the Lewis and Clark expedition in the West. That, you know, it didn't just magically happen in St. Louis, Wood River. It started long before that. And so I think we all owe him a debt of gratitude for Undaunted Courage, but also for recognizing and acknowledging and writing about that history leading up to it. I also have to, you know, I think about this, the way things get done in National Historic Trails. This isn't, you know, for me in the National Park Service, we don't come in and manage National Historic Trails. We are all about working with people, about collaboration, about bringing people together. It is all about partnerships. It is not about management, it's about collaboration, it's about working together, which is very fitting when you think about how this extension happened, when you think about how the expedition happened. And there's so many important partners in this, I can't name them all, but I really have to recognize two groups that have been vitally important for this trail. And, you know, on a national scale, our good friends with the Lewis and Clark National Trail Heritage Foundation. Lou Renton is here, and many other past presidents have played a really important role, and I thank you for your support. And we're also very blessed and honored to have a friends group, the Lewis and Clark Trust, and I really want to thank Jim Mallory and Stephanie Ambrose Tubbs, who have contributed so much and supported us all along the way. And I know there's many, many others of you who've contributed so much. I also really want to thank the folks here in Clarksville that when we called up and said, hey, we want to do something to recognize this really important event. We want to do something to acknowledge this, and we'd like to do it in Clarksville. The answer was yes. We're ready. What can we do? And I appreciate that so much. That has been so valuable. And I'm so pleased to be here. I'm so pleased to see everybody here. And let me, on behalf of the National Park Service, the Department of Interior, officially announce the Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail has been extended, and it runs from Pittsburgh all the way to the Oregon coast. And now I believe we're going to have a special event coming up here, a very famous event. Involves a handshake, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. Got our folks here because this was where it happened.
Greetings, Captain.
One more time. All right.